we're starting a series called This Summer in the Psalms, and when you came in, I gave you a piece of paper. If you haven't got a copy, don't worry. The reason I've given you this piece of paper is because Psalms is a book of poetry. And it's not the only book of poetry in the Bible. Proverbs, it contains some poetry as well. There are other poetic books. But it's not poetry like we know it. It's not all rhyming couplets and such like. And the type of poetry you get, Hebrew poetry, is described as parallelism. These are relatively not complex words, but unfamiliar words. And so I just give it to you as a tool. I don't expect you to use it right now in the preach necessarily, but rather when you look at Psalms in your own time, there's some guidance there to understand why is it that the psalmist seems to repeat himself. He'll say something and then say almost the same thing again. Or why is it that he'll say something and then the line afterwards doesn't seem to quite fit? Or how does that, why is it these lines work the way they do? And so there's some examples of parallelism in there. And so as an example, type 6 on your page says, of synthetic parallelism, says a statement followed by a result. So if we think of the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. It's a statement followed by the result. The Lord is my shepherd, and as a result, I shall not want. And so this is the kind of poetry that we see in the Psalms. So the sheet is there for you to take away, read it in your own leisure, use it alongside whatever psalm you might read this summer, or the psalms that we're reading together. It's the resource for you to use as you please. There's a video as well I was going to show today, but I'm not. I'm going to send it out as a link in an email, and you can watch that. It also helps explain how to sort of engage with Psalms, which personally, I'll be honest, I found difficult the first time I used to read Psalms. I was like, I just don't get it. I just don't connect with it. And some of these tools have really helped. Now, the reason I'm really encouraged by our worship this morning and some of the prayers, that Stephanie's prayer about a bruised reed, Cynthia's encouragement to sort of step into that. My sense was, as we were singing, that actually there might be within us a great desire to be able to sing these songs. For some of us, that they come naturally. And for others, you're like, I kind of want to be able to sing like that. I want to be able to feel that emotion, that sort of the song resonates. But I don't always feel it. And then immediately after Cynthia's prayer, the next line that we sang with, blessed are those who come to him. It was an invitation into that experience, that sense of, yes, I can praise and worship. But for some of us in the room, we might not be in that place. We might feel that actually we're in something of a wilderness. And the title I've given for our psalm today is Worship in the Wilderness. Worship in the Wilderness. And I think when we're in a time of suffering, we're prone to ask similar questions. When life isn't panning out the way you think it is, a time of loss, a time of hardship, a time of uncertainty, there tend to be a couple of questions that we're likely to ask. Questions like, why? Why is this happening? Why me? Why is this happening to me? And then on the back of that, our prayers tend to be, Lord, please stop this. Please stop this from happening. Lord, please take this away. Please return to me that thing that you've taken. That thing that I am suffering with, that thing that I have lost, I'd like it back, please. And I'd like it back as soon as possible. Those tend to be our natural heart cries. Why is this happening? Why is it happening to me? Please make it stop. Please return to me the things that they used to be, or the way I want them to be. And as we're going to read in a moment, Psalm 63, it's about worship in that wilderness place. But before we read it, I want to give you a bit of background so you can understand. This is a psalm of David, and it's a psalm when he was in the desert of Judah. So if you have read 2 Samuel, and if you want to read it, 2 Samuel chapter 15 to 17. So this is towards the end of David's reign. David is now king over Judah and all of Israel, and this is after He's the incident with Bathsheba, and where he takes Uriah's wife, Bathsheba, he sleeps with her, he ends up having Uriah killed, and sometime after that he's now got, subsequently he's got other children who have now fully grown. There's been some stuff going on in the family which he's not really dealt with particularly well. He sort of turned a bit of a blind eye to it, without getting into the details, between some of his sons. One son's killed another son. Absalom killed another son, one of his brothers, and Absalom was sent off into exile. And then eventually Absalom is welcomed back into the kingdom. But Absalom is not sort of without bitterness. And Absalom, if you read it, he's such a preener. I mean, this is a guy who rides around Jerusalem, which is a city with narrow streets, in a chariot with people in front of it. It's like driving a Ferrari down a cobble street. It's clearly not practical, but it looks good, you know. And so Absalom is this kind of guy, and he's basically usurped his father. He's managed to curry favor with the people of Israel, and he has basically forced David to flee from the palace. And so Absalom has moved in. He has forced his father out. He has desecrated the throne. He has taken his father's concubines and slept with them in full view of the whole of the nation on the very rooftop where David had taken Bathsheba. And he has basically exiled David. David is now on the run. He is fleeing from Absalom and from Ahithophel, who was David's trusted advisor, who's now turned against David as well. And he's on the run. After all those years of having been on the run from Saul, and having survived all of that, and then been victorious and placed in the palace as he was meant to be, and leading the country and being God's chosen person, he now finds himself back on the run. He's back in the cave, and he's had everything stripped away from him. His family is not with him. His title has been gone. His privileges in the palace and his access to the places of worship have been removed from him. He has been stripped of absolutely everything that he had. Let us read Psalm 63 together. It will appear on screen for you. And so in that wilderness place, this is David's prayer. You, God, are my God. Earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you in a dry and parched land where there is no water. I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory. Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift up my hands. I will be fully satisfied as with the richest of foods. With singing lips my mouth will praise you. On my bed I remember you. I think of you through the watches of the night. Because you are my help, I will sing in the shadow of your wings. I cling to you. Your right hand upholds me. Those who want to destroy me kill me will be destroyed. They will go down to the depths of the earth. They will be given over to the sword and become food for jackals. But the king will rejoice in God. All who swear by God will glory in him, when the mouths of liars will be silenced. I'll draw your eye back just to verse 1. It says, You, God, are my God. Earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you in a dry and parched land where there is no water. David's lost everything. As I said, his son has betrayed him, his advisor has turned against him, his wives have been defiled, he's lost everything. And his natural response, and I think our natural response, would be to say, what on earth are you doing, God? What on earth is going on? How has this happened? Please make it stop. Please put it all back. Please return what you have taken. God, give me back Absalom whole and good. Give me back the palace. Give me back your sanctuary. That would be, I think, the natural prayer response. And it's not uncommon to find that in times of hardship, that's when we most readily turn to God. That's been my experience. I'm sure it's been your experience too. In those moments of great suffering, that's when we feel like we have to turn to God most impassionately. But do we seek his gifts? Do we seek his power to resolve the problem? Or do we seek the giver? See, David's response is not what I consider to be the natural response. His response is to submit to his circumstances. God, you are my God. There's no questioning about whether or not he's now turned his back on God and rejected God. No, God, you are my God. Above all things that he has lost, the thing he desires most is God. I seek you. I thirst for you. I long for you. If you read through it another time, I'd encourage you to just underline just how many times you see the word you. That is the absolute focus of this psalm. In the contrast that's being set up, in this dry land where there is no water, the thing that you need most to sustain you for life, David says, I'd prefer God. I want God above the water that I need. He doesn't ask for help. He doesn't ask for explanations. When everything has been removed and he finds himself back in the wilderness again, on the run again, at his very core, the thing he treasures more than anything else is God himself. He's not primarily interested in God's gifts. He's interested in God the giver. It is a heart cry of David, a deep, deep longing. It's not one that perhaps we're familiar with. That sort of sense, that deep, deep longing. And so you could reasonably ask the question, where does it come from? Where does this deep longing come from? And this heart cry stems from intimate relationship and encounter with the living God. The heart cry stems from an intimate relationship and encounter with the living God. If you've got your Bibles open still, let's read verses 2 and 3. I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory. Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. Why does David crave God above all else? His longing for God, which we'll see in a moment, leads to worship and assurance, is birthed out of knowing God. He longs for God because he knows God. David has previously spent time in God's presence, and in doing so he's witnessed his power and his glory. He's experienced his love in such a way that he values it more than life itself. Now, we use that phrase quite flippantly. Oh, it's more than life itself. But this is not hyperbole for David, because he's at a point where his life is at risk. He's at the point where he's being pursued, but yet he loves God more than life itself. We value life highly, and rightly so, because it's a precious gift. And if someone was to approach you on the street and put a weapon in your face and say, give me your money or your life, the sensible response is to say, take my money. Money, life. And we're used to making sacrifices to protect our life. If someone said to you, you have to have an operation, it's a life-saving operation, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to cause you pain. The recovery is going to take a long time. Comfort comes below saving our life. We will endure great hardship, great pain, and great suffering in order to preserve our life. But David says, money, comfort, life, God. God's love is more precious to me than my life itself. Why is it that God's love is more precious than life itself? Well, life is finite. God's love is infinite. Life is temporary. God's love is eternal. He understands the true value of God's love. Now, I want you to imagine it's a hot summer's day, like today, but much hotter. and you're thirsty for a drink. And someone comes and offers you a drink and says, I'll get you whatever you want. What thirst-quenching drink would you like? Now for me, that answer is very simple. On a hot day, the thing that is most satisfying, and this is a fact, you're all wrong if you disagree, the most satisfying thing to drink is pub Coke from the draft. Ice cold pub Coke, full fat, none of that, sort of Coke Zero nonsense. Full fat Coke from the draft pub is the most satisfying thing. If I was offered that option, I would not say, well, I've never had a pint of Guinness, so I'll try a pint of Guinness. If I want a satisfying drink, I turn to what I know to be most satisfying. It's highly unlikely you choose something you've never had before. And for David, in this dry and parched land, what he desires is what he has found to be most satisfying. He turns to God, he wants God, because he's already tasted that God is most satisfying. And in the same way that I would talk and wax lyrically about the good and the best thing being pub Coke, not a very good analogy, I appreciate. But David's thirst leads to worship. In the same way I would extol the values of pub Coke, he extols the values of God much better than I do. Let's read verses 4 through to 8. I will praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift up my hands. I will be fully satisfied as with the richest of foods. With singing lips my mouth will praise you. On my bed I remember you, I think of you through the watches of the night, because you are my help. I sing in the shadow of your wings. I cling to you, and your right hand upholds me. In this place of desperation, in this wilderness place, this position of suffering and loss, David calls to mind his times in God's presence, and the very memory of those leads to worship. The very memory of his times in God's presence leads to worship. And those are words that we're familiar with. He praises, he sings, he lifts up his hands, as many of us have done today. These are acts of worship. It consumes him. I remember you. I think of you. I imagine that picture, that sort of David is now fleeing. He's in the cave. It's not a comfortable night's sleep. He's lying awake at night, and his thoughts turn to the thing that he treasures most. I lie awake here, and I think of you. I remember you. Like a distant love, I remember you. And then he writes, I cling to you. It's the same word. The word used there for cling to you is the same word used in Genesis 2 to describe how a man cleaves to his wife. It's a relationship of great intimacy. I cling to you. It's the same word used elsewhere as stick. They're inseparable. And when he finds God, when he holds close to him, he finds that God upholds him. Because of his past encounters and relationship with God, and because he finds God and continues to uphold him, he has assurance. He longs for God. He knows God. He worships God. And he has assurance in God. He has an assurance in the future. Let's read verses 9 through to 11 and see David's assurance. Those who want to destroy me, kill me, will be destroyed. They will go down to the depths of the earth. They will be given over to the sword and become food for jackals. But the king will rejoice. The king will rejoice. All who swear by God will glory in him when the mouths of liars will be silenced. There is absolutely nothing in his circumstances that should give him any confidence about what he's just sung, about the victory over his enemies, or the fact that he will remain king. He's not in his palace. He's not on his throne. There's nothing about his circumstances that says this is going to work out well. And yet he is confident of victory. In fact, so much so that even at this very moment, as his son sits on the position of power in his royal city, David refers to himself as the king. Because God had made him a promise. Charlotte read some verses which sort of reference that, about his throne lasting for all generations, that God would be faithful. God has made him a promise. He has known God to be faithful. So he has assurance. He has hope. I think we use the word hope differently than the way the Bible uses it. I use it a lot. I use it a bit of a, if we're honest, we use it as a bit of a byword for wishful thinking. So I will often start my emails to people, mainly because I don't like to go bluntly with a request. I'll say something like, hello so-and-so, hope you had a good weekend. Hope you're well. And those are good things to hope for. I do hope you're having a good weekend, and I do hope you're well. But I've got no evidence to that. It's almost like I kind of hope so, but I don't know for certain. I hope England win tonight. I don't have any evidence for it, and I'm not certain of it by any means. That's not how the Bible uses it. As the Bible uses it, it's about a conviction. The outcome is a certainty. It's the timing that remains uncertain. David is absolutely sure that he will have the victory and he will return to the throne. He just doesn't know when. Micah 7 verse 7 says, "But as for me, I watch in hope for the Lord. I wait for God, my Saviour. My God will hear me." Romans 8:24 and 25 says, "For in this hope we were saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopes for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait with patience." The outcome is certain. It's just the timing that's uncertain. It's a different use of the word hope. Now, as we've read those verses and we consider them, I wonder what your reaction is. I wonder how they sit with you this morning. I'd spent some time in these verses this week, and I understood them, and I wondered how does this speak to us this morning? And so I'm just going to tell you how they speak to me, and I think this will speak to you. And the first time I read that, as I read that psalm, I think to myself two things. That's just not me. That's just not me. And the second thing I feel is, I want it to be me. I want that to be me. And so, that's not me. And maybe it's not you. If I'm honest, it's more me now than it was 10 years ago. It's more me now than it was 20 years ago. But it's still not me. Do I thirst for God? Do I long to be in his sanctuary? Does worship and praise come as easily to my lips as it seems to for David? When I lie awake at night, my thoughts aren't always about God. Do I feel confident that when times of trouble come, my first instinct will be to seek God and him alone, and to cling to him and to tell him, I want you above all things, more than my very life? That's not me. Not as much as I want it to be me. You see, I kind of read the Psalms. I read this Psalm, and I don't know if you have the same experience. You read other Psalms, and you kind of look at it and go, there's bits of it that feel like me. I can resonate with that bit. But this bit doesn't quite feel like me. I don't quite get that bit. This bit, yes, not so much this bit. It's like looking at a picture slightly out of focus. You see, I think that, I don't know if that's your experience of the Psalms. It's like a picture slightly out of focus. I get some of it, but I can't connect with some of the other bits. Well, I would argue it all comes into focus when we look through the lens of Jesus. Walter Brueggemann, when he was writing a commentary on Bonhoeffer's Dietrich Bonhoeffer's explanation of the Psalms, he says, "We do well to ask of every psalm, how does this psalm sound when we listen to it from the lips of Jesus?" And so I want to read it to you again. I want to read this psalm to you again, but I don't want you to imagine this on the lips of David in the cave. I want you to imagine this on the lips of Jesus during those 40 days in the wilderness, at a time when he's thirsting and hungering, when he's being harassed by Satan, the father of lies. How does this psalm, bearing in mind he is the one who has been in God's sanctuary like no one ever has, how does this sound on the lips of Jesus? You, God, are my God. Earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you in a dry and parched land where there is no water. I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory. Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift up my hands. I will be fully satisfied as with the richest of foods. With singing lips, my mouth will praise you. On my bed, I remember you. I think of you through the watches of the night. Because you are my help, I sing in the shadow of your wings. I cling to you. Your right hand upholds me. Those who want to kill me will be destroyed. They will go down to the depths of the earth. They will be given over to the sword and become food for jackals. But the king will rejoice in God. All who swear by God will glory in him, while the mouths of liars will be silenced. It's not me, but I want it to be me. I want it to be me. I want to love God like this. I want to encounter his power and his glory in such a way that the very memory of it sustains me in suffering. Oh, that we could make that our prayer for our times of corporate worship. Imagine encountering God, seeing his power and his glory, such that you longed to be here on a Sunday. That when you're away on holiday, you can't wait to get back. When you're ill on your sick bed, you are desperate to get off to be back in his presence here. It's these kinds of moments where we are to seek his power and his glory to fill the reservoir of our soul for those times of hardship and suffering. Perhaps that feels just a little bit unattainable. Perhaps that sense of being able to sing the psalm feels somehow out of reach. In your own strength and efforts, it is. But in Christ, it is not. Christopher Ash quotes John Calvin when he talks about the Psalms, and he says, "Christ is the great choir master who tunes our hearts to sing God's praises." Christ is the one who leads his church in praising God. So when we read a psalm, we are not being asked to carry the burden of praising God on our own. Rather, we are invited to join the choir of Jesus as he leads us in praise. The initiative is with Jesus. The song is by Jesus. The tune is set by Jesus. All we do is join in. And that makes praise a joyful and glad calling. In conclusion this morning, maybe as Stephanie has prayed, you are in a moment of suffering. It's just a place of hardship at the moment, that wilderness place. And your thoughts of Psalm 63 is that's not my experience, but I want it to be. I want that hope and I want that assurance. I want to know that kind of comfort. Maybe that's the place we're at this morning. Alternatively, you might be in that place going, that sounds a bit like me. It used to sound even more like me. I want more of that again. I want to be able to sing like David sings the Psalms. Maybe I want to be able to say with David, I thirst, I long. You satisfy me Your love is more precious than life. I would trade my life for you, Lord. And maybe you've never experienced that kind of depth of love, but you can see something in this psalm. You can see something that is beautiful, something that is truly precious, and you want it. You want to know what it means to feel that kind of love. Whichever one you're at this morning, I want us to respond together. So the band are going to come back up and get ready to lead us back into worship. But I'm going to encourage us to respond together by praying the psalm. So I've reverently edited the psalm so that we can pray it back to God. So the band are going to come and join us. And the psalm is going to come up on the screen, hopefully. Not the verses, it's slightly further down. I've edited it so that we can say it. There we go. So can I encourage you to stand? And whatever place you find yourself in this morning, whether it's that wilderness place, or whether you've experienced this and you want to experience more, or you can say, I've never known love like that. This is your opportunity. So I'm going to say the psalm, and I'm going to ask you to say it with us, and then at the end, we're going to conclude with worship. You, God, are my God. Earnestly I seek you. May I thirst for you. May my whole being long for you, as in a dry and parched land where there is no water. May I see you in the sanctuary and behold your power and your glory. Because your love is better than life, let my lips glorify you. May I praise you as long as I live, and in your name lift up my hands. May I be satisfied by you as those satisfied by the richest of foods. With singing lips, let my mouth praise you. On my bed, may I remember you and think of you through the watches of the night. You are my help. I sing in the shadow of your wings. I cling to you, and your right hand upholds me. We will rejoice in God, and we who swear by God will glory in him. Amen.